is still the voice inside of me that is calling out your name. So it's a keep informed and lonely since the day that.
All right. Thank you very much, our host Jacinta, for today. It's such an honor to be here tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Grace Nzula. I'm a HR consultant with Atara Solutions, and you are tuned in to Get It Right with Atara Solutions. This is a webinar series that seeks to demystify issues in employment and entrepreneurship. We are here every Tuesday from 8 o'clock to about 9 something, and we seek to discuss different issues that really affect us in both our workplaces as employers and employees. So Atara Solutions is a HR consulting firm that offers 4 services. We offer recruitment and selection if you're looking for somebody to support you in recruitment. We also offer HR consulting if you're looking for somebody to support you on job evaluations, if you're looking for somebody to help you do your HR audits, if you're looking for somebody who can help you do your salary surveys and salary structures, if you're looking to upgrade your policies or get them reviewed, if you're looking for documentation as well, we will be able to help you with those things. And then we also offer what we call HR manager outsourced for organizations that don't have a full-time HR or they are looking to outsource their HR department. We are able to take on that on your behalf. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, and allow me to invite Richard to also introduce himself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Magoma. And of course, we know that every Tuesday is a moment for clarifying, simplifying, explaining, decoding, interpreting, illuminating, and unpacking. And that is what CHRP Anne Wamonje is going to do tonight. We are so delighted to have you, CHRP Anne Wamonje. Thank you. Yes, you are on mute, I think.
Gosh, and the way I've spoken. Allow me to invite you to a training that is happening this next month. If you have not booked this one, you need to really quickly do that. We have a program we like to call Legal Intrigues, and with us, so Legal Intrigues, this time we have partnered with Anne Babu. She's going to be discussing the common pitfalls in performance management on Thursday, 16th of April from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And IHRM members, you get to earn 1 CPD point. This will be a virtual call. So please join us on this day, and I believe Paul will be sharing the link on the chat just now. So welcome to Legal Intrigues. This is on the 16th of April, and it's only for 3,000 shillings for 3 hours with Anne Babu. If you know of lawyers in employment and you don't know Anne Babu, you don't know what you're missing out. So please join us, and let's explore this topic together. Allow me to recognize our partners. We have Herbert Zaker. Herbert Zaker runs Steadfast Quality Solutions. This is a HR consulting and public relations consulting company located in Kampala, Uganda. And Herbert is our partner in Uganda. And then we have K2 Services in Rwanda, our partners in Rwanda. Thank you so much for your partnership. If you're looking for support either in Uganda or Rwanda, we will be able to link you up with them. Thank you so much. And at this point, we are looking at the topic of contracts. And we want to understand or learn how to prepare bulletproof contracts. And therefore, we are here with my colleague, Anne Wamonje, Anne Wamonja is CHRP Anne Wamonja, sorry. She is a PhD student of human resource and, of course, a master's student of human resource management. And she has been in HR for over 15 years. One thing that stands out about Anne is she's a fitness enthusiast. So if you're looking for somebody to help you go with to the mountains, she has gone to Kilimanjaro and Mount Kenya among others, and she trains very hard. And she really is an amazing soul. So Anne Wamonja, please take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Grace. Good evening, Richard. My name is CHRPK Anne Wamonja, as Grace and Richard have rightfully put it. And thank you so much for joining this session this evening for us to be able to understand employment contracts. And yeah, if you are looking to go to the mountains, not the other kinds of mountains, proper mountains, please reach out. I know somebody who can take you there. That aside, today we are having a conversation around contracts. And why are we talking about this? Is because for HR professionals, compliance becomes one of the biggest issues for you. And part of maintaining compliance or ensuring compliance is looking at the contracts that you as the representative of the employer is presenting to the employees. And if you're working as a consultant, as a HR consultant precisely, part of the assignments that you will get along the way is a client will come to you and ask you, kindly review my contracts so that we can be able to make sure that we are giving the right or the legal documents that need to be given. And whenever you go to the court of law, we have a lot of issues that arise because there was no existing written contract, or there was a written contract, but the terms were not very clear. So it leaves room for interpretation by the employee or by the employer or whoever is interested to interpret those terms as they choose to. So before going into too much, allow me to share my screen so that we can be able to have a look at the presentation that I have prepared around this subject. And then we can ask questions as we move forward. So I am a certified HR practitioner, and currently I am a consultant with Atara Solutions. I am a trainer and an award-winning mentor. We currently run a HR mentorship program called Growth Grid. This is our third cohort. And what we are basically doing is supporting HR professionals who are looking to get into management roles so that they can be able to have a strategic outlook around HR as opposed to the general administrative HR function. I am also a co-author of a book called Overcoming Imposter Syndrome that was published last year, 2025. And as Grace has put it severally, I am a fitness enthusiast. I'm just coming from the gym 10 minutes ago. And I am also a hiker. I write on my HR blog called www.humanresource.com. And here we are. So when we are talking about contracts, we have, and here we are talking about employment contracts, or what we otherwise would call a contract of service, because there is a contract for service and then there's a contract of service. A contract of service is what we ordinarily call the employment contract. That is what is provided by the employer to an employee. It determines an employment relationship. Then we have a contract for service. That is what you give to a contractor or a consultant or those other kinds of engagements. So that clarity is important so that as you develop the contracts, you know that there are certain things that differentiate a contract of service to a contract for service. So today we will be discussing specifically employment contracts or a contract of service. And I want to believe that most of us here are HR professionals. And even if you are not, if you are employed at one point, you have been given a document by your employer to go through that they have said these are the terms and conditions of engagement. So that was the contract, or that is the contract. So a contract of employment is a legally binding document, because once that those terms have been outlined by the employer and you have been given and you have read and possibly understood, or not read but you have signed it, then it becomes a legally binding document, so that at any given time in future, should there be a case of dispute or there is litigation that comes up along the way, then that contract will be read again, so that we can find clarity around what are the terms and conditions, or what were the terms and conditions of your arrangement. So this is a legally binding agreement between an employer and an employee that establishes a relationship between those two parties, where one person works for the other. So there is one person that is providing the job, and then there is the other who is delivering, and they get paid in exchange for that service in form of a salary, or what we call a remuneration. So this brings me to a statement that I like to say a lot. The relationship between you and your employer is transactional. There is a service that needs to be offered. You are the one offering the service. In exchange, you get paid for it. No feelings. It is a give and take kind of relationship. And that give and take is clarified with an employment contract. So when we are reading about an employment contract, or we want to understand more about employment relationships, in Kenya particularly, we make reference to Part 3, and the sections precise here are 7, 8, 9, and 10 of the Employment Act 2007. And because I understand we have some audience from Uganda, you make reference to Part 4, Sections 23 to 28 of the Employment Act 2006. So when you read those parts or those sections, you will be able to understand precisely what is the relationship between you and your employer, and how is it drawn in terms of the terms and conditions, or what are the specific areas that should be included in a document that is binding between the two parties. Now, the difference, the legal aspect between the Employment Act of Kenya and Uganda are not very far apart when you read those two documents. However, the Employment Act 2007 provides clarity around what should be included within an employment contract. However, when I read through the Act for Uganda, I did not find that clarity, but I am sure that the structure of the contract is almost similar. So, there are three types of employment contracts. One, there are verbal contracts, what we call a gentleman or a gentlewoman's agreement. You have met, you have spoken, you have agreed, you will come. This is the work that needs to be done. And I, as the person who is receiving the instructions, I come and get the job done. No, nothing was written. We talked, we agreed, this is what needs to be paid. The challenge with that kind of arrangement is one, the terms are open to interpretation. So should we have a dispute, then we go to court, and I as the employee will be able to say that at the point of engagement, he had said that he will pay me 30,000, and then he said he would add another 10,000 after 3 months. But you as the employer, because now our relationship has soured, you will say that, but that is not what we agreed. And now it opens the door, or there is room for a lot of interpretation around verbal contracts. Then we have written contracts. Legally speaking, written contracts are expected for any engagement that is supposed to go beyond 3 months. There has to be a written agreement between the employer and the employee. So if And the 3 months we are talking about here is, the limit for casual employment, as we all understand, is 3 months. So after 3 months, you can no longer consider me to be a casual if I have been working with you consistently for that period of time. So the law tells us that for any engagement that goes beyond 3 months, the terms and conditions of the same must be written down. So this is going to be the point of our conversation tonight around the written contract. Now, there is also the third kind of contract, which is the implied. Implied, we did not talk about any terms. We did not write each other down, but I have been working for you and you have been paying me. And I like to give a very simple example. You have hired a house help, and during December, she or he went home. You guys had agreed that after that, now your children have become big. They have gone to boarding school, so you no longer need the help. So you released her for December. She went. She came back in January. She continued to work in your household. You continue to pay her salary, but you guys have not defined the terms of that arrangement. If they continue to work in your employment for that arrangement, for that period, and you continue to pay, and later on you say, but I never employed them, it will be interpreted that by you accepting that they are coming to your house and you paying them at the end of that period, you implied that you employed them. And another interpretation around this is, and this is where for us most HR professionals, we are found in error. A term contract has ended and you gave this employee a contract for 1 year between 1st of January to 31st of December of 2025. At the end of that period, the contract has expired naturally. That is a very natural separation. There is no obligation between the employer and the employee for the renewal. But come January 2026, Anne has reported back to work. There has not been a formal renewal of the contract, but I have continued to work. The employer has continued to pay my salary through the bank account. Coming June, then you realize, oops, we never renewed the contract. By then, probably we have had differences and I have sued you. You fired me or I resigned or whatever, I have sued you. Now we are in court and you're coming to court to defend yourself and say, but their contract had ended in December of 2025. So we did not renew. The court will interpret that non-renewal and the continued engagement to mean that you implied that that contract was renewed under the previous terms from 1st of January of 2026. So the point I'm trying to put across here is whether you renew it in writing or you don't, you have renewed it. So the best part for you is to probably just put the terms down formally, and if there are some terms that are coming to change, you rectify that with a formal renewal. But leaving that door open and saying, we did not renew their contract, by you letting them continue to work, you have automatically renewed that contract. Now, the responsibility of drawing an employment contract lies with the employer. You cannot say that the employee was never given an employment contract. It was your job to be able to draw that contract and to be able to issue it to the employee from the onset of that arrangement. If you failed in your job, then ignorance would not be a good defense for you. Now, what are some of the legal requirements of an employment contract? First, the document itself must be legal. And by legal, we mean that it must be within the law, the provisions of the Constitution, of the Employment Act, and any other act of parliament that surrounds employment and employment relationship. Therefore, it means that the terms that you are offering in the contract must not be lower than what the legal provisions have given. For example, if the legal provisions, for instance, say that annual leave is, in Kenya, we are talking about 21 days. working days for every 12 completed months. You cannot say that in your company, we only give 18 days per year. You can give 22 days, you can give 21.5, you can give 30, but you cannot give 20.9 days. So the terms that you have provided in your contract can only be within the bare minimum that the government has provided or that the legal provisions have, or above. So the terms can be better, but not be lower. Number two, the contract must be written in a language that the employee understands. And the law is very clear, both in Uganda and in Kenya. If an employee does not understand the contract given the language barrier, it is your responsibility to interpret that document to your employee so that they can understand those terms. Because if you give them a contract, for example, and they are illiterate, they will definitely sign it because they needed the job. But now, when push comes to shove, and now you are supposed to defend your document, and then along the way, you find some illegalities in there, and you say, but the employee signed and accepted those terms. It does not make any difference. An illegal contract is an illegal contract, whether the employer signed it or did not. Number three is there must be consent from the employee. Now, the other mistake that we make as HR professionals is we issue a contract to an employee and then we forget. Then we only remember after we have been sued, or after the period had elapsed, and now we are wondering, what are we supposed to be renewing? The employee is required to consent to the document either by signing it through the signatures that we know, or putting a thumbprint. Those are the two ways that you receive consent from an employee for a written contract that they have accepted the terms that you have stated. So make sure that anytime you issue an employment contract to your employee, it has to be signed, there has to be a witness. So both signatures and dates are there. Don't just accept a document with a signature. Make sure the date is also put there, so that in case you find yourself in court and they say they did not sign it, then you have proof. Usually you have two copies. One is given to the employee and one remains with the employer. Now, when you go to court, the onus is on the employer to be able to produce the employment contract. So make sure that you have a document that was acknowledged. Anything outside of a consent, we say in Kenya, employment is at will. It means that both the employee has been given an offer, they have accepted voluntarily. Anything outside of that is what we call forced labor. So the consent is important. Now, what are the particulars of a written contract? And this one is the legal expectation. So we will come back to Section 10 of the Employment Act 2007. That is where you will find the particulars of a written contract. So remember, we are discussing bulletproofing your employment contracts. Now, for the employer, you need to know what are the areas that I must be able to include in the contract. For the employee, if you are issued with a contract, there are certain clauses that you have to look for so that you are sure that they are existing within the document that you are about to sign. Don't be too excited because you have found a new job and forget to actually read the document that you have been given. So number one, the law provides that the contract must have the name of the employee, their age, their permanent address, and the sex. Now, the employer is entering into employment with an adult. So the full name. Now, the thing here about the name, please remember to ask your employee for their national ID. I have found a lot of instances where people use names that In an ordinary, on a normal day, they are called Grace Nzula. But in their ID, you will find that their name is Gracie Atieno, or Nzula does not even appear there. You see? So always make sure that you enter into an agreement with somebody using their legal name, not the one that they told you this is my name. So ask for the national ID so you verify, so that later on, if you go to court and you're suing Grace Nzula, but in court, the person who appears that you are purporting to be Grace Nzula produces an ID calling her Grace Atieno, and they say, me, I don't know that company, I have never worked there, then there's a problem. Number two, there has to be the name of the employer on the contract. And now this is an area also that we need to be able to emphasize about. There is the name that you use that you have registered. And then there's the other name that you guys call yourself here as an organization. Make sure that the name that you're entering into agreement is a legally registered name, so that this is a legally registered entity that is getting into an employer-employee relationship with someone. So the other thing here is there are organizations where you call yourself whatever group, Atara group. Then under Atara group, there is Atara services, there is Atara limited, there is Atara whatever. You must determine which of these is my primary employer. Because at the end of the day, you will find that when the month ends, as you are submitting your statutories, under Atara group, there is a subsidiary under which my statutories will be submitted under. That is my employer. If these employer details change, then it means that there has to be a discussion around the change of employer name, because now I will be entering into an agreement with another entity. You understand? And somebody will be able to ask, what if I am the overall HR for the entire group? That is fine. You can be able to perform those functions as have been provided to you under the job description. But the question is, who is your primary employer? So the employer name is important. Then there is the job description. Now, normally, you want to put the job description in a contract. It is okay. However, what we normally recommend is that you have a JD as a separate document, because the JDs can change. You don't need to change the entire contract when my JD changes. But you can always revise a JD while maintaining the rest of the terms and conditions of my engagement. So within the contract, what you will be able to provide is generally just an overview of what am I supposed to be doing. Why is a JD important in this instance? Is because there has to be clarity around, if you are hiring me as a HR officer, what are my day-to-day responsibilities as your HR officer? So that the next time we are quarreling around, you hired me as a HR officer, this was the job description, suddenly you want to fire me because I have not made sales. And I am asking myself, but I was never hired as a salesperson. How come I now am being appraised as a salesperson? So that is why it is critical to be able to be clear around what are the roles and responsibilities of this position that you are hiring for. Now, there is the date of commencement of employment. This is important, especially for term contracts, but all written contracts. When is this arrangement starting? There are two things to put into consideration here. There is the date that you have drawn the contract, and then there is the date that the employment starts. For example, today is 24th of March. You are hiring Anne to come and join the company from 1st of April. But the contract has been drawn on the 24th of March. It therefore means that the date of commencement of my employment is on the 1st of April. But then there is also another instance where we will agree that the date of commencement is 1st of April and you have signed the contract and we have agreed, but somewhere along the way, instead of reporting on 1st of April, you have agreed with the employer because of other engagements, I am going to start on 6th. But I had already signed the contract that says the start of employment is on 1st of April. So within that contract, you want to put in a clause that the start of the official start of employment will be from the date of reporting, so that that clarity is there. So whether they are reporting to work virtually or they are reporting physically, but we are supposed to start on 1st of April. However, you are also providing clarity around should there be changes around the date of reporting. So you can figure out the right grammar to be able to use on that. Now, the next one here that you need to look at is the form and duration of the contract. When we're talking about form, is what type of contract are you issuing? Is it a term contract? Is it an open-ended contract? A term contract is where we have clarity around this is the start date. We are starting from 1st of January 2026. This contract will run for a period of 12 months up to 31st of December 2026. Then there is an open-ended contract where you only put the start date, but it ends when we separate. And as we separate, we can separate through resignation, dismissal, termination, death, redundancy, etc., all that. So make sure that you are clear on the term. How long is this contract going to run? If it is a casual contract, it expires at the end of each day, right? What is the duration? Now, also, in your contract, you must make sure there is a place of work. Where will be my primary place of work? As a company, you have an office. My primary place of work will be at our head office in Nairobi. You will also be, you may be reassigned to work in our other branches depending on the need, and this will be communicated to you in advance. You have to declare where my primary place of work is going to be. It has to be clear so that I know that I work in Nairobi and I can be sent to Busia, I can be sent to Uganda, all that. All right. Then what will be the hours of work? And this is where a lot of employers try to play dirty. They don't want to say what my hours of work will be. It is important that you are very clear on what are the hours of work. The normal working hours are 8 hours. So if you are saying we are working from 8 to 5, or we are working from 7 to 4, or we are working from 9 to 6, whichever, you cover the 8 hours. If you are working a 12-hour shift, like if you're in the private security industry, you are clear that those are the working hours from the onset. But you also know that with those working hours, if they exceed 8, then we are going to be talking about overtime. But be clear on what are your working hours. If you're working from Monday to Friday, you say if you're working from Monday to Saturday, you are clear on Monday to Friday, we'll work from 8 to 5. On Saturday, we'll work from 9 to 1, etc. If these are people who are working on shifts, like if you're in a hospital setup, you are also clear what the working hours will be. And you will be able to be clear that the contract, they should be able to look out for the shift arrangement as will be provided by their supervisors. The other thing is the remuneration and the interval of payment. How much will you pay for this? How much will you be paying me at the end of the month? Now, when we are talking about remuneration here, there is normally the issue where you give a gross salary, and then you assume that because you have stated that it is a gross salary, it is inclusive of housing allowance. As you all know, you are supposed to pay, an employee is supposed to receive housing allowance or you house them. So in order to cure this problem, because whenever you go to court, an employee will come and say, I was being paid a gross salary of 40,000 without housing allowance, and they will be right, because you are not clear that this 40,000 was inclusive of housing allowance. So you always need to be very clear. Or the other wording that you can be able to use is, you will be paid a gross consolidated amount, a monthly gross consolidated salary. Please remember, gross consolidated salary of 40,000 shillings. That is inclusive of all those other allowances, or you can expressly just mention that this is inclusive of house allowance. You must also inform the employee that this amount will be subject to statutory deductions. Statutory deductions in the Kenyan setup, we know about the NSSF, SHIF, housing levy, pay as you earn, all those ones. So you need to notify them that these will be subject to mandatory statutory deductions, so that when you start to deduct this money, they are not asking you why did you recover this and that from me, because you don't need an employee's permission to recover statutory deductions, but you need to inform them that that 40K is out, it's inclusive. I mean, it will be subjected to statutory deductions. Now, the other problem that HR professionals do is they put a net salary on an employee's contract. Very dangerous move. Why? When you say you will be paid a net salary of 30,000 shillings, what you have done as an employer is that you have tied yourself to statutory obligations that will come up later on. Because we agreed that every month I will receive 30,000 shillings in net pay. So if today the government wakes up and decides that now we are going to increase housing levy to this amount, me, at the end of the month, I still expect my 30,000. You people will need to top up the difference, so that at the end of the day, I must go home with my 30,000. So even if you have agreed during interview that the person will be paid 30,000 net salary, as you issue the contract, work backwards and find out what will the gross amount of that be. Unless you have specifically committed yourself that the employee will only be paid a net throughout their terms of period of engagement. The interval of payment here is where we are talking about, will this money be paid every 2 weeks, every month, at the end of every month, or when? All those things. The law does not tell us expressly what date an employee's salary must be paid. However, it must be paid. So that one you can agree on internally as a matter of policy, but you have to be clear that this amount will be paid in arrears at the end of each month. So that I am clear, I am not waiting for my salary at the end of the week. For a casual employee, it has to be paid at the end of each day, or you can put it together and at the end of every week, on Saturdays, as we pay there in Mjengo, you pay. But if it moves, if you are working with casuals and you end up paying them on a monthly basis, those people are not casuals. Again, we are talking about implied contracts. Those ones are contracted employees. So your casuals must only be paid at the end of the day, or if it is too long, it must be the end of the week. The other area that you need to consider within your employment contract is the leave entitlement. This is critical because leave is a right. So you have to come out and say, how many leave days will you be able to provide? If you're talking about annual leave, you count it in calendar days. If you're talking about working days. If you're talking about maternity leave, paternity leave, pre-adoptive leave, sick leave, you are counting calendar days. So you have to be very clear on what are the leave days that somebody is entitled to. Remember, a contract must be legal. And this is where a lot of illegalities happen, especially around leave entitlement, where you come up and say that you will provide maternity leave for only 2 months. It is not a very wise thing to say publicly. or even privately. So the terms of the leave entitlement must be within the legal provisions. And also remember, as you talk about leave, as you read the Employment Act, find out within your industry, are there any collective bargaining agreements that have been signed? So that you don't say 21 days, but you know you are working in the private security setup and you're supposed to provide a minimum of 26 days. All right? The other bit is when you're talking about leave entitlement, there are different kinds of leave. There are leaves that are provided legally, and then there are leaves that are provided by the employer. So when you're talking about aspects such as compassionate leave, study leave, unpaid leave, those are leaves that have been provided outside of the legal framework, but the employers provide them to make the employees life easier, or as an add value. So if you want to add that also as part of the contract so that there is clarity, please go ahead and do that. The termination clause is important. The termination clause is under what circumstances will you separate? So this will be able to cover on a normal termination, you are expected to provide, if I am on probation, you are expected to provide a minimum of 7 days. Remember, there is nothing wrong with drawing a contract that says that during probation, you will provide a notice period of 14 days. Or if it is a senior role, then you will say during probation, we will provide a notice of 1 month. There is absolutely nothing wrong about that. However, if you say that either party can terminate the contract of agreement and you can only provide 6 days or 5 days, then now there's a problem. Again, remember what we said, that a contract of service must be legal. Under the termination clause, you will also put in the aspect of summary dismissal. Remember, termination is used very loosely. There is the normal termination as we know it, and then there is the summary dismissal where it is attached to gross misconduct. The terms of those separations are different. So please make sure that the termination clause is there and the summary dismissal clause is there, and you are clear on what is going to, what are some of the things that if the employee does, it will amount to gross misconduct that could lead to summary dismissal. You can make reference to section 44(4) of the Employment Act as far as summary dismissal is concerned. Now, when it comes to the notice period, I have actually explained that conclusively. So I also talked about looking at the CBAs that may affect the terms of engagement, and look at the industry that you are working under. For example, when it comes to the remuneration aspect, depending on the industry, there are certain allowable deductions that your industry has allowed as far as the CBAs that have been signed there are concerned. And I'm going to give an example of a private security company, because you provide your security guards with boots, you provide them with uniforms, you provide them with all that. So there is an allowance around the deduction of those uniforms, which is then refunded when the person leaves. So look at what are the regulations around my industry so that you incorporate that into the contract that you are drawing. Now, assume that the employee is expected to work outside of Kenya. This also needs to be clear because you are employed in Kenya, but you have been sent to work in Uganda. So the question here is, what are the terms around, for example, the payment of my salary? In what currency will I be paid? Am I going to be paid in Kenya shillings or am I going to be paid in Ugandan shillings? So those things should be very clear. And all these other entitlements that we are talking about, you need to come out very clearly and indicate that in the contract. Now, these ones that I am going to discuss now, this is not very legally defined, but they are important to have clarity within the contract. And it helps you because having this clarity that we are going to talk about is going to save you a lot of headache when it comes to disputes and litigations in future. So, for example, how are you going to be handling disciplinary and grievance related issues? If I have an issue with my colleague, who do I report this to and how will it be handled? These are clauses that can be written in very brief. When it comes to disciplinary aspect, there is the aspect of warning letters. How long does my warning letter expire before it is not necessarily expunged, but how long does it take before it expires? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Things like that. There is the aspect of the general code of conduct, within the company, because these are the expectations of how the employer would like the employee to behave during the employment period. So do you want to put that within as summarized as possible within the employment contract, so the employee does not say they didn't know? For example, and code of conduct here, I want to give you an example of the conduct of an employee outside of employment. What does that have to do with you as an employer, as far as, let's say, for example, if an employee is involved in a fraud case or they're involved in what, does that, if that brings the image of your company into question, would that be able to attract a disciplinary aspect? Because I know there are organizations that are very clear around that. Your employment, your conduct outside of work is none of our business. However, should it bring the image of our company in question, then that becomes a disciplinary issue. Now, there is an issue of confidentiality. Every employee handles documents or they come into contact with employer secrets and all that, depending on the nature of the job. So how are you going to, are you going to talk about as far as confidentiality matters are concerned? You have to be very clear that you have expectations around confidentiality, and the employee is supposed to not do this and this and this and that. There is also the manner in which, and this is tied to confidentiality, the data protection aspect, especially for the data handlers within the organization. How are they supposed to handle employer data or employee data that they come into contact with? There is always the other clause around non-competition and non-solicitation. Let me give an example here. You are working, say, for instance, in a media organization, and you say you are a news writer. And within your contract, your employer did not say that because I am writing for the Daily Nation, I cannot write for the Standard. So I have been writing for the Standard for the last 1 year, then they discovered and they fired me. But there is nowhere within the contract that they ever mentioned that I cannot write for a competitor. So it is very clear to be able to come up and state these non-competition clauses. And then solicitation. I am working with you and say, for instance, I leave that organization and now I start to poach people from you. Or I am looking at engagements with your suppliers and with all that. So be very clear on your expectations around competition and solicitation. And this brings me to the aspect of conflict of interest, because all these issues around non-competition and non-solicitation, they all come up to the aspect of conflict of interest. So have a clause within the contract that provides clarity around that. And then there is the harassment. This is critical. And why this is important? Because it touches on the aspect of sexual harassment. And harassment is broad. But I am speaking on this because specifically on sexual harassment, because as an employer, one of your responsibilities is to make sure that the employees understand the issue of sexual harassment. Actually, you're supposed to have a sexual harassment policy if you have 20 employees and above. Best practice is that if you have 1 employee and above, you need to have a sexual harassment policy. But because you will not be hanging the policy around everybody's neck, put a clause within your contract. around your zero tolerance to sexual harassment and the reporting of that and the possible action that would be taken around investigation and eventually the final action. So it is important that that bit of harassment is touched, and not just sexual harassment, but generally the aspect of harassment and bullying in total, and any other particulars that you may wish. However, remember, you cannot give an employee a 15-page contract. All these things that we have talked about, you need to summarize them in words that first must be, an employee must be able to understand, and secondly, in a manageable document that I do not have to spend 2 weeks reading. It is not a novel that I have bought. Very important factors to note. The revision of the employment terms must be discussed between the employer and the employee before they are formalized. You will not wake up and give me a contract that is supposed to run between 1st of January to 31st of December of 2026. And then we get to April, and then you change the terms of my engagement and you just bring me the document and you tell me, I have sent it to you on email, sign it. That is not acceptable by legal standards. So you have to discuss it. Then those terms of engagements that have changed are revised, and they are presented to the employee, and then they are signed. Now, in terms of retaining an employee's particulars, legally you are required to, after separation, you are required to retain employment documents for a minimum of 5 years. After that, you can decide what to do with them. I know there are companies where they, as a matter of policy, they say 10 years or 20 years or forever, it is okay. But by the minimum is 5 years before you can be able to get rid of the particulars. And if there is anything else that you can take away from this, the onus of producing an employment contract lies with an employer in any legal proceedings, not the employee. If they say I was employed at Atara Solutions, and you say, no, we did not employ them, you have to provide evidence. Me, I will just provide my bank details of the money that you have been paying there every month. You have the obligation to provide the arrangement in terms of the terms and conditions of that arrangement. Otherwise, anything that I say as an employee, as far as what we had agreed, may go. So, like I said when I started, please draw the contract of employment as an employer and issue it to your employee. And that brings me to the end of my presentation for tonight. And I am open to any questions. Whether you are an employee or an employer, please remember you are free to ask your questions around this so that we can be able to have clarity on this matter of contract. Okay.
Thank you very much, CHRPK Anwa Monje, for that wonderful, perfectly done presentation. Now we turn into questions. But before we turn into questions, ladies and gentlemen, let us appreciate what Anne has done. She has really simplified. She has really unpacked. She has really made complex matters simple. But before we conclude, there are questions that have been missiled to Anne, and the first one is, should one continue working even if the contract has expired? Employer notice before and says verbally they will renew but don't renew, and they go silent on you, but you have company. So this is a personal question. To this anonymous. These are not an absolutely a personal question. So go for it.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So this is the thing. Like I said when I was talking about the types of contracts, and this was a warning shot to the HR professionals, and I said, whether you have renewed the contract in writing or not, if I continue to work with you and you continue to pay me, it is implied that that contract of mine was renewed under the previous terms. So if there are any questions that arise later, we will make reference to the last contract that you issued me. Now comes the question of, should I continue working? A term contract is one of the easiest ways of separation between an employer and an employee. It's actually a natural separation process. The employer is under no obligation to renew a term contract, and I am going to explain that, unless, but then the employee is also under no obligation to continue working. If my contract ended yesterday and you did not renew it, you did not tell me, or you said it verbally and I did not, and there was no documentation done, and today I did not report to work, you cannot be writing me emails to tell me why am I not on duty, because I am not employed by you. If you wanted to employ me, you send me a legal document, I will read it and sign it and get back to you. However, you can choose not to continue working, and there's nothing that the employer will do. In fact, nothing will happen, and they cannot ask you to give notice. Now, like I said, the employer is under no obligation to renew a contract of employment, a term contract, once it expires, unless there is a clause there of unless. Unless the employer has created a reasonable expectation on the employee that they will renew the contract. And this is a funny thing, because in some of those contracts we write that the renewal of this contract is subject to availability of funds, your performance, or your whatever and your whatever, right? So my contract was renewed for the first year. It was renewed the third year, fourth, fifth. On the sixth year, you're now telling me that I was expecting it to be renewed, and you're telling me it will not be renewed. What you have done over the last 5 years, you have created a reasonable expectation in my mind that you will be renewing my contract. And then all of a sudden, you just ice me out. I have a case against you. So please do not create those reasonable expectations by saying it will be subject to availability of funds, and then you have enough money, but you say that you don't want to renew my contract for whatever reasons. And remember also, if you are renewing my contract at the end of every year religiously for the next 10 years, there is no difference between me. You cannot even call me a contracted employee. I am a permanent employee in that company. There is no difference between you having given me a 10-year contract and you renewing this one on a yearly basis. So as HR professionals, please look at that, so that instead of those annual contracts, you're already happy with my work. So why are you doing this 1 year thing? Just give me a 3-year contract. We'll come back and discuss. Richard.
Okay, you have several questions. I don't know how you're going to apportion time in responding to them. There are actually more than 20 questions, and we have only 10 minutes. Lucy Wairimo, hello, does the mention of housing allowance apply to part-time engagements? Briefly.
Just say that again. I think
hello, does the mention of housing allowance apply to part-time engagements? If you are in part-time, maybe a lecturer, you are working at Atara Solutions part-time, should the housing allowance be mentioned?
Yes, it must be mentioned. It is a statutory deduction. And the issue here is not the part-time engagement. The issue here is, what are the terms of your employment? You see, because even if you're engaging me on a part-time basis and you're paying me at the end of the month, for as long as I run you on my payroll, I must recover statutories from you. And right now we are also recovering statutories for casual. So yes, we will be able to recover that housing allowance. So remember also, as an employee, even if you are working part-time jobs in 7 different companies, all those 7 different companies will recover statutories from you, and they will submit them. Richard.
The only difference comes in when you are a consultant.
Yes, if you're a consultant, yes.
Then the deductions will go to you. There is a question by Alice. If a cashier is paid on a daily basis but works for 6 days consecutively, are they entitled to pay for the 7th day, which is a rest day? Are cashiers paid Daily entitled to annual leave or sick leave? Those are several questions in one.
Yes, a casual employee is somebody who the working arrangement expires at the end of each day. So it means that you only pay them for the days worked. Yes, every employee is entitled to one rest day per week, a minimum of one rest day per week. So it does not mean that because you have engaged me as your casual and you pay me at the end of the day, now you want to work me for 30 days continuously. On humanitarian grounds, by the time we get to the 14th day, I am already too exhausted to even continue working there. So I'm just showing up to, But the issue of these entitlements around leave, whatever, all those things, sick leave, whatever, it is not an entitlement, because if I am a casual and I am sick, I will just not show up. And if I don't show up, we are not asking each other, why didn't you come? Because my contract with you expires at the end of every day. Richard?
Yes or no on the next one. Helen Manua, are interns entitled to annual or maternity or paternal leave? Yes or no, so that you answer other questions.
Okay. So normally we confuse two things. We confuse internship and industrial attachment. We kind of call them the same thing, but they are not. So for an intern, this is somebody that is probably just starting their career and you have issued them with a contract of engagement. So remember, an intern is an employee. An industrial attachee is a different arrangement. If you are interning me for the next 12 months, and then you say, I am not entitled to these other things, then that is not fair labor practice. So define within your contract with the intern, are you going to provide them with in terms of these legal requirements?
Okay.
Richard?
Lina and Zive, if you have been working with a cleaner on a casual basis 3 times a week and you are now considering a long-term one-year engagement, for example, could you advise issuing a contract for service or a fixed term?
If the 1 year of service is still going to be the 3 days a week, then you probably want to bring them on board. You may want to give them a consultancy kind of, I don't know whether cleaners are consultants, but possibly that would be the arrangement, because here is a situation where you have clear terms of reference. These are the TORs for you as our consultant. You will come in, you get the cleaning done, you get out. So you may want to give it as a consultant, but the other thing is I would prefer that you give that person a contract of service, employment contract. Why? Because these are wage earners. You want to be able to do the SHA and those are very important things for cleaners. So I would still recommend that you engage this person on a contract of service.
What is the difference between service pay and gratuity? That is by Saumu Hasimu.
Now, service pay and gratuity. When we're talking about gratuity, let me start with explaining gratuity. Gratuity is a gift that an employer gives an employee at the end of a term of service where you have agreed that you have served me for the last 10 years or 15 years, and I am saying thank you for your commitment. Gratuity is not necessarily anchored under law unless there is a clear CBA that has provided for that, because it is not something you can demand from an employer unless it was written in your contract that you will have gratuity paid to you at the point of separation. Why? Is because the law says that if you are a member of a social security fund, then the employer is not obligated to be able to pay gratuity, right? So it is a gift. You don't demand for a gift, you see. And we use the word gratuity and service pay interchangeably. I would want to be able to say that. So, because the other bit of it would be the severance pay, which comes in under retrenchment and redundancy. But we use that interchangeably, Richard.
Thank you. There is a question by Dorothy Moindi. Which is correct, to give an appointment letter after gratuity pay to employees and renewing their contract, or rather, how should it happen after years service pay? What is the correct? You got it?
No, I did not hear
Which
that.
is correct? Which is correct,
Uh-huh.
to give an appointment letter after gratuity pay to employees and renewing their contracts, or rather, how should it happen? I think she's asking about at what point in time should you give a letter of appointment? Is it at the time that you have given gratuity or after? I don't know. Yeah.
But letter of appointment is a letter of us starting an agreement. Unless there is a renewal of a contract here, because what I have seen organizations do is that at the end of every contract cycle, they pay that gratuity and that arrangement is done. Then now they give you a new letter of appointment with different terms when they are renewing the contract. Because like religious organizations, because this gratuity thing is something very personal to them, and they extend that to the employee. So what they do is that, say it is a 3-year contract. Once that contract has ended and they pay you the gratuity, then they issue you with a new appointment letter and a contract with new terms. So the point of payment really is neither here nor there, whether it will be paid on the 30th or on the 5th. But by the time this first contract has ended, before you get into the other, they would have already calculated what the amount will be. Then now they can pay it at whichever date. But yes, before you issue the new appointment or the new offer letter, make sure that you have at least computed the gratuity amount and agreed with the employee, so that the only part that is remaining is the payment of it, which you guys can be able to agree on depending on the availability of funds.
Very good. We are 4 minutes past time, but let me quickly, we finish at 20. Sorry, indulge me or indulge us. Did you say sick leave is 21 calendar days? Some people have a problem, paternity, maternity, annual leave. When do you count it? Should you count the calendar days or whatnot? Yeah.
Annual leave is in Kenya, annual leave is a minimum of 21 working days. So it takes out holidays, it takes out rest days. I'm not saying weekends, I'm talking about rest days. Depending on when your rest day is, that varies from industry to industry. Sick leave, maternity leave, paternity leave, pre-adoptive leave, those ones are counted in calendar days. So
Correct.
the employment, as far as sick leave is concerned, it talks about a minimum of 7 days with the full pay and the next 7 days with half pay. However, best practice has placed it at 30 days with full pay and another 30 with half pay. So that is, and it has been considered in court. So you need to revise that. Pre-adoptive leave is 30 calendar days. When we are talking about maternity is 3 months calendar days, paternity is 14 days calendar days again.
Very good. That is good. There is a difference between calendar days and working days. There's a question here, I think, which is very important, although we are running short of time. It is by Lydia Namunde. If you realize you've made a mistake in a contract, it has been signed, how do you correct it?
An addendum to the contract.
Okay.
An addendum to the contract rectifies it, and you say the other terms and conditions, you rectify the part that had a mistake, and then you make sure that you add the other terms and conditions of your employment remain unchanged.
Very good. I know, ladies and gentlemen, we will stay here forever, and that is why you should attend the performance conversation on the 6th of April. These questions will never end. I'm sure Atara Solutions will prepare us another legal-based discussion. Your parting shots, Anne.
Okay. Now, my parting shot around this is I'm going to do it in two parts, to the employers and to the employees. To the employers, you must remember, and the employers here are represented by HR professionals. And also, as I speak to employees, I know HR professionals are still employees. So, in your capacity as the representative of the employer, please remember that before you issue out a contract, you must make sure it meets the minimum threshold. Is it a legal document? Number one. Number two, remember it is your responsibility to issue the document, or rather to write or to draw that contract. It is never the employer or employees. So you cannot go to court and say that we did not employ them because we didn't issue them with a contract. They were working there, they were getting paid, so they were obviously your employee. So to be clear on the clarifications around the terms of engagement, make sure that you put them down in writing. Remember, if it is not written, everything else that you're telling the judge, he does not know what you're saying. Number two, to the employees, the excitement that comes around getting a new job, it is very good, it is very nice, but please take time to read the contract before you sign it. And if English is shortchanging you as you are reading the contract, please give it to somebody you can trust to be able to help you read and interpret it. If you have any questions that you need clarity on, that you might want a professional to assist you, please reach out so that before you append your signature to the contract, you have actually agreed to those terms. Just going around and telling your employer that I know my rights alone does not help you. Make sure that you actually know those rights. And you need to consult a professional who would be able to guide you properly before you sign any contract of engagement, especially for the people who are just coming into employment for the first time. Don't run into that document and sign it first. Get somebody who has suffered in this town long enough to know the streets very well. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time and your attention to this session. Thank you, Richard and Grace and Atara Solutions in general. I appreciate your presence. Asanteni sana. Back to you, Richard.
Yes, thank you very much. And if you are in doubt, give somebody who has put their boots in the trenches so that they can help you. And that is where Atara Solutions comes in for one-on-one conversations regarding contracts. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a delightful moment today to demystify contracts. Let us meet on Tuesday for another demystification of an important concept as we wait for the 16th of April for understanding performance management, especially the pitfalls. And Babu is a priceless gem when it comes to employment law. Ama ni uongo, Ann? Si ni ukweli?
Ann Babu is the person you want to listen to when it comes to these legal issues. So please take time, register for this session, and it's only 3,000 shillings, and you will have a good return on investment there. So please register and join the session, and you will be able to learn so much, especially around performance management, because that is where a lot of us HR professionals, we fail. And we start to argue on emotional basis as opposed to facts. So please register for this session. Paul, you may add in that link to the chat box so that those who are interested would be able to register and join the session on the 16th of April.
Thank you very much, Anne, and everybody who has collaborated in this episode. Thank you very much. I can see my good friend Wilfred Mosigis is asking if you will give notes. Ordinarily, the notes or the slides or the decks are not given unless Anne wants to, but ordinarily, those are intellectual property things. Unless
no, we will not give the notes, but this is on our YouTube channel. You can be able to listen to it once again on our YouTube channel, kindly.
Thank you very much. Good night and enjoy your supper and good night.
Asante.
Mhm.
Good night, all.
Come on, let's you boys with me. Driving through on Sunday morning, and I never want to leave. Fingers trace you every hour trying. Oh yeah, yeah. Paint a picture with my hands. Oh. Back and forth we sway like branches in a storm. Change the weather still together, weatherland. And that may be all I need. In darkness,